Earlier this month, I was reading a book. I know. Shocker. The book was The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor. Now, this is just your typical self-help, how to be happier sort of book, sort of quick read. And while I wasn't completely enamored or super in love with the book itself, there were a few interesting tidbits in there, and one in particular called the 20-second rule. So I set out with an experiment in mind. The question is, can I make myself happier in 20 seconds? Now, here's the idea behind the 20-second rule. Essentially, we want to remove as many barriers to change as we can. So I'm going to use the example that Shawn Achor uses in his book because, frankly, it makes a lot of sense. The author, Shawn, wanted to learn how to play the guitar, but he was having a hard time sort of motivating himself to get there. So the first thing he thought he would do was use a motivational tracker tool. You know, where you say, I want to do something and I want to learn something new. I'll make a little chart or a little tracker or like a little sticker method. Basically anything that gives you visual proof that you were working towards an accomplishment, you know? So he put a paper up on his wall, and his goal was to practice the guitar for like 20 minutes a day or something, and then every day he would tick off a little bit of the chart. And he convinced himself that this was going to be like amazing for sure, this was gonna work, this was gonna be the thing that made him finally learn guitar. In theory, it was a good idea, but it ended up working horribly for the guy. And then whenever he would look at the chart of progress and it was 0, he'd feel terrible. And that would not really incline him to learn the guitar. It would just sort of introduce these negative feelings instead of happy ones. So that whole method did not work for him. The reason Shawn thought that the whole charting technique did not work is because it's essentially trying to form a new habit based on willpower alone. And I am definitely this way, where willpower just does not work. For example, like with your diet, willpower can only get you so far. If you tell yourself, I am not going to have any chocolate cake, I'm not going to have it, I'm not going to do anything bad, no donuts, nothing sugary, I'm going to be extremely strict, I've got this, I can do it. Well, that works for a little while. But eventually, it's like all you can think about is the fact that you're not having it. At one point or another, the floodgates open and you go on a binge session. That's what happens to me, and that's why I refuse to do without, because if I want chocolate cake, gosh dang it, I'm gonna get it. Willpower wasn't working. It doesn't work for a lot of people when they're trying to diet, and in Shawn's example or experiment, it did not work when he was trying to play guitar. Shawn had to come up with a new idea, a new way of doing that wasn't based solely on willpower, and his thought process was about the path to least resistance. And that is where the 20-second rule comes in. When you think about it, a lot of what you do is just because it's there. For instance, when you get home at night, you turn on the TV because the remote's within reach and the couch looks so comfortable, and it's sort of just what's available to you, and it's the easy way out. So Shawn thought to himself, what if we can take the idea of this path to least resistance that often leads to bad habits, but we redirect it into cultivating good habits? The first time Shawn had tried his whole practicing guitar, chart tracking thing, he had his guitar in the closet. Now, it's pretty close, okay? It's not like, you know, he has a small apartment, so it's not that the guitar is super out of reach or hard to get to or anything, but it's still in the closet. So Shawn had an idea. He got a $2 guitar stand and put the guitar in the middle of his living room. And he would put whatever was distracting him from the guitar further away. So for instance, if the thing that was distracting him was the TV remote, then he would maybe take the TV remote out of instant reach in the living room and put it far away. So as soon as he sits down on the couch, the guitar is closer, the remote is far away. So what's more likely is that he just does what's available, what's closest. And I know it sounds crazy, but often these small changes are what really make the difference between good habits and bad habits. The entire structure of the 20-second rule is, let's make things that I want to improve on, or my good habits, easier and more accessible to do, and let's make my bad habits a little harder to achieve. Let's create some degrees of separation. Shawn gives a lot of examples. For instance, a guy who couldn't stop checking his email at work because he just left the app open. So simply close the email app. That way you don't have these constant pings saying, hey, come distract me, and not focus on the work you wanted to get done. It's these really small, subtle shifts that can really make a big difference in the entire way that your day gets spaced out and what you can accomplish in it. So I decided to take the advice from Shawn Achor and the Happiness Advantage and do a little 20-second experiment of my own. You might remember in my coffee table book video that I had a secret strategy behind the books I was selecting. And this, my friend, was the secret strategy. I wanted to see if I could do the same thing that Shawn Achor did with his guitar with one of my goals, which is to read more of my vintage nonfiction. So I asked myself two things. A, how can I make my goal, my vintage nonfiction, more accessible and easier to reach for in those moments of choice? And how can I decide what it is that's distracting me or keeping me from actually reaching for it? How can I remove the bad habit and keep that a little bit far away? Now, it's not about going without. It's not about saying that I absolutely couldn't be on my phone or on TV instead, because that would bring it back to being solely willpower, and it will fail, because that's like saying to yourself, you're not allowed to have anything fun or relaxing and you must punish yourself. Then the good habit you're trying to create becomes something you want to avoid. So it's not about stripping the opportunity to do different things away. It's just about creating more degrees of separation between you and the things getting in the way of your good habits. So here's what I did. For the last week and a bit, I have had my vintage nonfiction books on my coffee table. And I've been doing an exercise where I hide my phone or turn my phone off completely and take it in a different room. Now, I could 100% get up off the couch once I sit down and go get my phone if I wanted to, but that requires a few more seconds of change. It requires 20 seconds or so, right? So what happens is that instead of me getting up from my comfy little nest on the couch and going to grab my phone for entertainment that's not really going to do much for me, I instead stay on the couch, look down at the coffee table, and what do you know, within arm's reach, there is my vintage nonfiction book. So, did it work? Was I able to actually read some of my vintage nonfiction? The answer is yes. It did work. I have had these books for years without reading them, years, and I've always meant to, but just this small change of putting them where they're easily accessible has made a huge difference, and I've actually started reading them and really enjoying the heck out of myself when I do. The 20-second rule completely worked for me, and I think this is a perfect example of how you can take what you've learned from books and put it into your regular life. I don't just want to be reading interesting things in books but never actually implementing them into my life. This was one of those times when I thought, hey, this is an easy way to see what changes I can make based on something I learned in a book. It's book smarts, you know, at its finest. So if you want to pick up The Happiness Advantage by Shawn Achor, please do. A lot of this is going to be intuitive stuff that you already know, things you know about how to be happy, but sometimes you do need a reminder. This is the perfect book for that. It's really short. I personally listened to it on Audible. It's about a 3.5 star read for me. A lot of it is psychology centered and summarizes different experiments that have happened. And I wish that it had been a little bit more practical, but certain aspects like the 20-second rule and a few other ideas of his really had an impact, and he was right. I tried it, it worked. So if this is a book you want to check out, I say go for it. And that, my friend, is the story of how I became happier and achieved more of my goals in 20 seconds, right? It's crazy. Thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. I hope you try out the 20-second rule. Take a second, drop me a comment, and let me know one of your goals and habits that you've been trying to achieve for a while, and see if this is something that you might want to try and see if it makes a difference for you. If you're new here and you haven't subscribed yet, but you like all things bookish, book reviews, book hauls, unhauls, TBRs, all the good stuff, then I'm your girl. So go ahead and press that subscribe button. Drop me a comment below, say hi, because I love getting to know you guys, and I will see you on the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye, guys.